The bullets shattered the cafe windows before Tasha even registered the sound of gunfire. Glass exploded inward like 1,000 tiny diamonds, raining down on her half-eaten croissant as Jinwoo's body slammed into hers, driving her to the floor. His hand clamped protectively over her stomach, over the baby she'd told him about just 2 hours earlier. The baby he'd planned. The baby he'd used to trap her in Seoul, in his world, in his arms. Around them, chaos erupted. Screams pierced the air as cafe patrons dove for cover. The sharp crack of gunshots echoed off marble walls. Tasha's ears rang, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribcage. Jinwoo's weight pressed her into the cold tile floor, his breath hot against her neck. She could smell his cologne mixed with something else, something metallic. Blood. Through the forest of overturned chairs and scrambling bodies, she saw him. One of the gunmen, stepping through the shattered window frame, weapon raised. His eyes locked on Jinwoo. On her. The world moved in slow motion as Jinwoo rolled, dragging her with him behind the counter. More gunfire. The espresso machine exploded, sending scalding steam into the air. Tasha's hands shook violently as Jinwoo pressed her flat against the floor, his body a shield between her and the violence. She caught a glimpse of his face. Cold. Calculating. This was not the man who brought her tea in bed. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. If you've ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they'd been playing chess while you thought you were playing checkers, drop a comment below. Because what Tasha discovers about the father of her baby will change everything. But before we get there, smash that like button if you're ready for a story about betrayal, obsession, and impossible choices. Now let's go back to where it all began. 72 hours earlier. The pregnancy test sat on the bathroom counter like an accusation. 2 pink lines. Tasha Swift stared at it, her hands gripping the marble sink so hard her knuckles went white. This couldn't be happening. She'd been careful. Religious about her birth control pills. Never missed a single one. She counted backward in her head, trying to make sense of it. 10 weeks. Maybe more. Her mind raced through the timeline of her relationship with Jinwoo. 3 months of whirlwind romance in Seoul. 3 months of falling for a man who seemed too good to be true. Because he was. She picked up her phone with trembling fingers and called Imani, her best friend back in Atlanta. Voicemail. Of course. It was 3 in the morning in Georgia. Tasha's voice cracked as she left a message. Imani, I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do. He said we were being careful. I thought we were being careful. Call me back. Please. She ended the call and stared at her reflection in the mirror. When had she become this person? The woman who'd moved halfway across the world for a consulting job that paid 6 figures. The woman who'd fallen in love with a mysterious Korean businessman who drove a Bentley and lived in a penthouse overlooking the Han River. The woman who was now carrying his child without ever planning to. Tasha grabbed her pill pack from the medicine cabinet, counting the remaining tablets. None missing. Every single pill accounted for. Her stomach turned. If she hadn't missed any pills, then how? She threw on clothes and grabbed her keys, her mind made up. She needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to her. The drive to Jinwoo's penthouse took 20 minutes through Gangnam's late-night traffic. 20 minutes of her hands sweating on the steering wheel, of her mind spinning through every conversation they'd had about the future. He'd never mentioned children. She'd assumed they were on the same page about taking things slow. Clearly, she'd assumed wrong. The doorman at Jinwoo's building recognized her and waved her through without question. She'd been here enough times over the past 3 months to be familiar. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like descending into water, pressure building in her chest until she could barely breathe. She used her key to let herself in. Jinwoo stood in the kitchen, cooking. He did that sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep. The domestic scene would have been charming if Tasha's entire world wasn't crumbling. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into that devastating smile that had first caught her attention at an art gallery opening 3 months ago. Jagiya, I didn't expect you tonight. I'm making bibimbap. Are you hungry? Tasha pulled the pregnancy test from her pocket and set it on the marble kitchen island between them. The smile faded from Jinwoo's face, replaced by something she couldn't quite read. Not surprise. Not shock. Something else. We need to talk, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jin Woo set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. He wiped his hands on a towel with deliberate slowness, then walked around the island to face her. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his dark eyes studied her face. "How far along?" he asked quietly. 10 weeks. Maybe more. She searched his face for any sign of the panic she felt. "Jin Woo, I don't understand. I never missed a pill. Not once." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to her stomach, then back to her face. When he spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "I know you didn't miss any pills, Tasha." Her heart stopped. "What?" "I stopped using protection properly about 6 weeks ago." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Tasha felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "You what?" "I stopped being careful. I wanted this." His hand reached for hers, but she jerked away. "You wanted this? You sabotaged my birth control?" Her voice rose, echoing off the high ceilings. "You had no right. No right to make that decision for me." Jin Woo's expression hardened. "You were making plans to go back to America. I saw the emails to your recruiter. You were looking at job opportunities in Atlanta. You were going to leave. So you trapped me? You got me pregnant on purpose to keep me here?" Tasha's hands shook with rage. "Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand how violated I feel right now?" "I protected us," Jin Woo said, his voice low and intense. "I secured our future. You would have left, Tasha. You would have walked away from what we have. What we have is built on lies. You don't trap someone you love. You don't take away their choices." She grabbed her purse, headed for the door. She needed air. Needed space. Needed to think. Jin Woo moved faster than she expected, his hand closing around her wrist. Not painful, but firm. "Where will you go?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Back to my apartment. Away from you." "And then what?" "Back to America. Raising my child on another continent." His thumb traced circles on her wrist, a gesture that used to comfort her and now made her skin crawl. "You're carrying my baby now, Tasha. That changes everything. Let go of me. You're under my protection now. Whether you want it or not." There was something in his tone that sent ice down her spine. Not a threat exactly, but a promise. An inevitability. She yanked her wrist free and ran. Back in her apartment, Tasha locked the door and slid down against it, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Her hands found her stomach, still flat, still unchanged, but everything was different now. She'd trusted him. Fallen for his charm, his attentiveness, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. All of it calculated. All of it a trap. She pulled out her laptop with shaking hands and typed his name into the search bar. Kang Jin Woo. She'd done this before, months ago when they first started dating, but she'd only skimmed the surface. Wealthy businessman. Import-export company. Connections to Seoul's elite. Now she dug deeper, translating Korean news articles with growing horror. The headlines painted a picture she'd refused to see. Kang Corporation linked to underground activities. Businessmen questioned in connection with Gangnam District incident. Rumors of organized crime ties to prominent family. She clicked on an image, and her blood ran cold. Jin Woo stood between two men in expensive suits, all of them outside a courthouse. The caption identified him as a person of interest in an investigation that had mysteriously been dropped. Another article mentioned the Biko Syndicate, the White Tiger organization that controlled significant portions of Seoul's underground economy. The article didn't name Jin Woo directly, but it didn't have to. The connections were there, hidden in plain sight for anyone willing to look hard enough. Tasha's mind flashed back to all the times she'd ignored the warning signs. The bodyguards who followed them everywhere, men Jin Woo called his drivers or assistants. Daesung and Hyun Woo, always nearby, always watching. The way restaurants cleared tables for them without reservation. The phone calls Jin Woo took in Korean, stepping away with a terseness that didn't match his usual smooth demeanor. The expensive gifts that appeared without explanation. The questions he never answered about his business. She'd been willfully blind, seduced by the fairy tale of being swept off her feet in a foreign country by a handsome, wealthy man who treated her like a queen. Now she saw the cage he'd been building around her, bar by bar, choice by choice. Her phone buzzed. Jin Woo calling. She let it ring. It buzzed again. A text this time. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning. Cafe Sora, 9 a.m. Please, Jagia. For our child. Tasha stared at the message. Our child. 2 words that bound her to him in a way she'd never agreed to. She wanted to refuse, to block his number, to book a flight back to Atlanta and never look back. But she couldn't. Her passport sat in Jin Woo's safe at his penthouse. He'd offered to keep it secure for her weeks ago, and she'd thought nothing of it. Another bar in the cage. She typed back with numb fingers. Fine. 9 a.m. Then she opened a new browser window and searched for the U.S. Embassy in Seoul. Whatever happened tomorrow, she needed an exit strategy. She needed to get her passport back. She needed to get out of this country before Jin Woo's trap closed completely. Sleep didn't come that night. Tasha lay in bed, one hand on her stomach, trying to process the reality growing inside her. A baby. Jin Woo's baby. A child conceived not out of love or mutual decision, but out of one man's obsessive need for control. What kind of father would he be? What kind of life could she give a child trapped between 2 worlds, 2 countries, 2 impossible choices? By the time dawn broke over Seoul's skyline, Tasha had made a decision. She would meet Jin Woo. She would hear what he had to say. And then she would find a way to leave, even if it meant leaving everything behind. The morning air was crisp as she drove to Itaewon, where Cafe Sora occupied a corner of one of the neighborhood's trendiest streets. She arrived early, hoping to claim some psychological advantage, but Jin Woo was already there. Of course he was. He sat at a table by the window, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. 2 tables away, she spotted Daesung and Hyun Woo, his ever-present shadows. Jin Woo stood when he saw her, pulling out her chair with the same courteous gesture he'd always shown. It would have been romantic if Tasha didn't know the monster beneath the gentleman's veneer. You look tired, he said softly, his eyes searching her face with what seemed like genuine concern. Did you sleep? What do you think? Tasha sat, keeping her purse in her lap, ready to bolt. After finding out the father of my child is a criminal who sabotaged my birth control? Jin Woo's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. I'm not a criminal, Tasha. My businesses are legitimate. The articles I read last night tell a different story. Articles written by people who don't understand the complexities of business in Korea. The politics. The jealousies. He leaned forward, his hand reaching across the table. She didn't take it. I've never hidden who I am from you. You've hidden everything from me. The Biko syndicate? The underground connections? The fact that you're basically a Korean mob boss? Her voice rose, and she forced herself to lower it, conscious of the other patrons. You let me think you were just a successful businessman. I am a successful businessman. What my family was, what the organization represents, that's complicated. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. How much I want this life we can build together. A waiter appeared, and Jin Woo ordered for both of them without asking. Her favorite breakfast, the one she'd mentioned liking weeks ago. Even now, he was demonstrating how well he knew her, how attentive he could be. Control disguised as care. I want my passport back, Tasha said flatly once the waiter left. I want to go home. Seoul is your home now. With me. With our baby. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide my life. I'm not deciding. I'm protecting. Jin Woo's voice carried an edge now, the smooth facade cracking. Do you know what happened to the last woman who tried to leave someone in my position? Do you know what my enemies would do if they knew about you? About the baby? Fear spiked through her anger. Is that a threat? It's a reality. The moment you became pregnant with my child, you became a target. That's why I have Daesung and Hyunwoo watching us. That's why we need to make this official. Marriage. Protection. A life where you and our child are safe. Safe in a cage. Safe and alive. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Tasha felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. I have an appointment at the U.S. Embassy this afternoon, she lied, testing him. I'm declaring myself in distress. They'll help me get home. Something flickered in Jinwoo's eyes. Not anger. Something colder. No, you don't. Excuse me? You don't have an appointment. I would know. The certainty in his voice sent chills down her spine. How would he know? Was he monitoring her communications? Had he hacked her email? You can't keep me here against my will. I'm an American citizen. You're the mother of my child. That supersedes your citizenship. Jinwoo's hand finally withdrew from across the table. I'm trying to do this the right way, Tasha. I'm trying to give you choices. But make no mistake, you're not leaving Seoul. Not now. Not ever. Tasha opened her mouth to respond, to scream, to do something, but movement outside the window caught her attention. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, parking illegally in front of the cafe. Its windows were tinted too dark to see inside. She watched Daesung stiffen at his table, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. Everything happened at once. The SUV's doors flew open and men emerged, weapons already drawn. Daesung shouted something in Korean, diving toward Jinwoo and Tasha's table. The front window exploded inward as gunfire erupted, transforming the peaceful morning cafe into a war zone. Jinwoo's chair toppled backward as he lunged for Tasha, his body slamming into hers with enough force to drive them both to the floor. Her head cracked against tile, stars bursting across her vision. Above them, bullets punched through walls, shattered dishes, turned the cafe into a killing ground. Tasha couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but register the weight of Jinwoo's body covering hers, his hand pressed protectively over her stomach even as death screamed around them. She heard screaming, realized some of it was coming from her own throat. A man fell near their overturned table, his eyes wide and unseeing, blood pooling beneath him. Tasha had never seen death before. Now she couldn't look away from it. Jinwoo shifted above her, and suddenly there was a gun in his hand. Where had it come from? She watched in frozen horror as he rose to one knee, firing with a calm precision that belonged in an action movie, not in the life of the man she thought she knew. Two of the attackers dropped. Daesung and Hyunwoo were returning fire from behind cover, their weapons appearing as if they'd always been there, always ready. The cafe filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and fear. Through the chaos, Jinwoo never stopped shielding her body with his own, never stopped protecting the baby growing inside her. The baby he trapped her with. The baby that was now the only reason she was still alive. As suddenly as it started, the gunfire stopped. The remaining attackers retreated to their SUV, tires squealing as they fled. In the terrible silence that followed, Tasha could hear car alarms, crying, the tinkle of falling glass. Jinwoo's face appeared above hers, his hands frantically checking her body for injuries. Are you hurt? Tasha, look at me. Are you hurt? The baby? She couldn't speak. Couldn't process what had just happened. Her ears rang from the gunfire. Her hands were covered in someone else's blood. We need to move. Now. Jinwoo pulled her to her feet, half carrying her toward the cafe's back entrance. Daesung and Hyunwoo flanked them, weapons still drawn, scanning for additional threats. A bulletproof SUV waited in the alley, engine already running. Jinwoo pushed Tasha into the back seat and climbed in after her, barking orders in rapid Korean to the driver. The vehicle lurched into motion, speeding through Seoul streets with practiced precision. Tasha sat frozen in the back seat, her body trembling uncontrollably. Jinwoo tried to pull her close, but she shoved him away with a strength born of pure adrenaline and terror. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Her voice cracked, hysteria creeping in at the edges. Those men, they were trying to kill us. They were trying to kill me. Jinwoo's face was granite, his eyes scanning the streets through the tinted windows. They were trying to kill me. You were collateral damage. That's why I told you this morning that you're a target now. This is the world I live in, Tasha. The world you're now part of whether you accept it or not. She looked down at her hands, still shaking, still stained with blood that wasn't hers. The dead man's face flashed through her mind. His empty eyes. The pool of red spreading beneath him. She was going to be sick. Pull over. Pull over right now. The driver glanced at Jinwoo, who nodded curtly. The SUV swerved to the curb and Tasha barely got the door open before she vomited onto the pavement, her entire body heaving. Jin Woo's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. She wanted to push him away again, but she didn't have the strength. When the spasms finally stopped, he handed her a bottle of water and a handkerchief. Always prepared. Always in control. Where are we going? She managed to ask, her voice hoarse. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't reach you. The SUV merged back into traffic, heading away from the city center. Tasha watched Seoul's familiar streets give way to highways, then to countryside. They'd been driving for over an hour when they reached a private airfield. A sleek jet waited on the tarmac, stairs already deployed. No. Tasha planted her feet when Jinwoo tried to guide her toward the plane. No, I'm not getting on that. Where are you taking me? Jeju Island. I have a property there. Secure. Protected. No one will find us. I'm not going anywhere with you. I want to go to the embassy. I want to go home. Jinwoo's patience, already worn thin by the attack, finally snapped. His hand gripped her upper arm, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to communicate that this wasn't a negotiation. Listen to me very carefully, Tasha. Those men at the cafe weren't random thugs. They were professionals. They knew where we'd be, knew the exact time. Someone leaked our location, which means someone in my organization has turned. Until I find out who, nowhere in Seoul is safe for you. Not your apartment. Not a hotel. Certainly not the embassy, which is probably under surveillance. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. I know you hate me right now. I know you think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But I will protect you and our child with my life. That's not negotiable. Now get on the plane. Tasha looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He meant every word. This wasn't about controlling her anymore. This was about survival. She got on the plane. The flight to Jeju took less than an hour. Tasha sat as far from Jinwoo as the cabin allowed, staring out the window at the clouds below, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. Yesterday morning, her biggest worry had been a positive pregnancy test. Now she'd witnessed a murder, survived an assassination attempt, and was being taken to an island fortress by a man who claimed to love her but had violated her in the most fundamental way possible. Jinwoo spent the flight on his phone, speaking in rapid Korean to what sounded like different people. Giving orders. Demanding answers. Being the crime lord he actually was beneath the businessman facade. At one point, his voice rose sharply, and Tasha caught enough tone to understand he was threatening someone. The man on the phone had made a mistake. That mistake had almost cost Tasha her life. She wondered if that person would live to see tomorrow. The thought should have horrified her more than it did. When they landed, 3 more SUVs waited on the tarmac. The security had tripled. Jinwoo's hand found hers as they descended the stairs, and this time she didn't pull away. She was too exhausted to fight, too overwhelmed to protest. The drive from the airport took another 30 minutes, winding through Jeju's volcanic landscape until they reached the coast. The property sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a sprawling compound that looked more like a fortress than a home. High walls. Security cameras. Armed guards at every entrance. Jinwoo's hand never left the small of her back as he guided her inside. The interior was beautiful, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows with ocean views, but Tasha barely registered the luxury. She saw only the cage. The guards. The isolation. The master bedroom is upstairs, Jinwoo said, his voice gentler now. You should rest. It's been a traumatic morning. Traumatic, Tasha repeated flatly. That's one word for it. A middle-aged woman appeared, bowing respectfully. Jinwoo spoke to her in Korean, and she nodded, gesturing for Tasha to follow. Mrs. Kong will show you to your room and help you with anything you need, Jinwoo explained. I've arranged for a doctor to come check on you and the baby. He should arrive within the hour. I'm not Mrs. Kong. Not yet. The words were soft but definitive. Tasha was too tired to argue. She followed the housekeeper upstairs to a bedroom that could have been featured in a design magazine. The bed was enormous, covered in expensive linens. The attached bathroom had a soaking tub that overlooked the ocean. Any other time, any other circumstance, it would have been paradise. Now it was just a prettier prison. Mrs. Kong laid out fresh clothes and toiletries, speaking in broken English about dinner and comfort. Tasha nodded numbly, waiting until she was alone to finally let the tears fall. She cried for the life she'd left behind in Atlanta. For the career she'd abandoned for what she thought was adventure and romance. For the naive woman who'd believed a fairy tale and ignored every red flag. Most of all, she cried for the baby growing inside her, conceived without consent, already trapped in a world of violence and impossible choices. After the tears dried, Tasha explored her new prison. The bedroom door wasn't locked, which surprised her until she tried the doors downstairs. Every exit was either locked or guarded. The windows were bulletproof. The property was surrounded by walls and armed men. Jin-woo didn't need to lock her bedroom door. He'd locked the entire compound. The doctor arrived as promised, a kind-faced older man who spoke excellent English. He examined Tasha with professional detachment, performing an ultrasound that showed a tiny flicker on the screen. A heartbeat. Real. Undeniable. The baby is healthy, the doctor announced, smiling. About 10 weeks along. Due date would be late June. Mother and baby both survived today's stress remarkably well. You're very strong, Mrs. Kong. There it was again. That name. That assumption. Tasha didn't correct him. What was the point? The doctor left her with prenatal vitamins and instructions to rest. As if rest was possible in a fortress on an island with no way home. Jin-woo appeared in the doorway as the sun began to set, his tie loosened, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. The doctor says you're both fine. Physically. Tasha didn't look at him, keeping her gaze on the ocean beyond the windows. Physically, we're fine. Everything else is destroyed, but our bodies are intact. Jin-woo crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance between them. I found the leak. One of my accountants was being blackmailed. His daughter's gambling debts. The Jade Dragons got to him, made him choose between his daughter's life and reporting my movements. Did you kill him? Tasha's voice was emotionless. She wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. No. I paid off his daughter's debts and sent his family to Canada. He'll live, but not in Korea. Jin-woo's hands clasped between his knees. The men who attacked us were Jade Dragons. They're trying to move in on Biko territory. Taking me out would create a power vacuum they could exploit. How nice for them. They failed, so I suppose they'll try again. They'll try. They'll fail. I've been doing this since I was 16 years old, Tasha. I've survived 7 assassination attempts. This was just another Tuesday for me. He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw genuine vulnerability in his expression. But you're not used to this world. You're not hardened to the violence. And you shouldn't have to be. That's why I brought you here. That's why I'm keeping you close. Not to imprison you, but to protect you from the consequences of loving me. You don't get to call it love, Tasha said, her voice breaking. Love doesn't sabotage birth control. Love doesn't trap someone. Love doesn't force someone into a life they never chose. You're right. The admission shocked her into silence. Jin-woo stood, walking to the window, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. What I did was selfish. Possessive. Wrong. I knew you were planning to leave, and I couldn't bear it. I'd lost everyone I ever cared about. My parents when I was 12. My mentor when I was 20. My best friend 2 years ago. Everyone I love dies or leaves. He turned back to her, and in the fading light, she saw moisture in his eyes. Then you walked into that gallery, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than emptiness. You made me want a life beyond the syndicate. Beyond the violence. I know I went about it the wrong way. I know I should have talked to you, should have given you a choice. But I was terrified that if I gave you a choice, you'd choose to leave. Tasha's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the rage that was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. But another part, a part she hated, understood. Understood the desperation of someone who'd lost everything trying to hold on to something good, even if it meant destroying it in the process. I can't forgive you, she whispered. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I know. And I can't promise to stay after the baby is born. I can't promise to be what you want me to be. I know that too. Jin-woo moved closer but didn't touch her. All I'm asking is that you let me protect you. Let me keep you safe until this war with the Jade Dragons is over. Then, if you still want to leave, I'll help you. I'll give you your passport, money, whatever you need. I'll even step back from the baby's life if that's what you want. Just please, let me keep you alive long enough to make that choice. It was the most honest he'd been since she'd met him. Tasha searched his face for manipulation, for the calculated charm that had drawn her in initially. She found only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. If someone trapped you with a pregnancy, would you ever be able to forgive them? Could fear and obsession ever transform into real love, or is that just what we tell ourselves to survive? Drop your thoughts in the comments because Tasha's about to face an impossible choice. And if you're invested in this story, hit that subscribe button because what happens next will change everything. 5 days passed in the Jeju compound, and Tasha fell into a strange routine that felt like living in a dream she couldn't wake from. Mrs. Kong brought breakfast every morning at 8. Jin Woo worked from a home office, constantly on calls in Korean, managing his empire from the island. Guards rotated shifts with military precision. And Tasha walked the grounds like a ghost, touching the walls that kept her in, studying the patterns of the security detail, looking for weaknesses she knew she'd never find. Jin Woo gave her space but never strayed far. She'd catch him watching her from across a room, his expression unreadable. At night, he slept in a guest room down the hall, honoring an unspoken boundary between them. The compound had everything she could possibly need except the one thing she wanted most. Freedom. On the 6th morning, Tasha woke to find Jin Woo gone. Mrs. Kong explained in halting English that he'd returned to Seoul for urgent business, that he'd be back by nightfall, that Tasha shouldn't worry. But Tasha wasn't worried. She was calculating. This was the first time since the attack that Jin Woo had left her alone. The first real opportunity she'd had to take control of her own fate. She spent the morning observing the guards more carefully than before. There were 6 of them on day shift, rotating in pairs around the property's perimeter. They changed positions every 2 hours like clockwork. And during the changeover, there was a gap. 15 minutes when the south entrance was less watched, when someone fast and desperate enough might slip through. Tasha's hands shook as she packed a small bag. Her phone, which Jin Woo had returned to her with assurances it was secure. The cash she'd found in her apartment, stuffed in her purse the morning of the cafe attack. A change of clothes. Nothing that would slow her down. At 2:45, she made her move. The guard shift change started precisely at 2:45, just as it had every day she'd been watching. Tasha slipped out through the kitchen entrance, keeping low, moving fast toward the south wall. Her heart hammered so hard she thought the guards might hear it. The wall was 12 feet high, but there was a storage shed near it that she could climb. She'd mapped this route in her head a dozen times, playing it through, finding the angles. The shed roof groaned under her weight, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This was her only chance. She pulled herself up onto the wall, scraping her hands on rough concrete, not caring about the pain. On the other side was a narrow road that wound down toward the main highway. And on that road, a black sedan sat waiting. The window rolled down, and a woman's face appeared. Western, professional, with steel-gray hair pulled back severely. Ms. Swift, my name is Director Rebecca Morrison. United States Embassy. Your friend Imani filed a missing persons report. We've been looking for you. Please, get in the car now. We don't have much time. Tasha didn't hesitate. She dropped down from the wall, her ankle twisting painfully on landing, and ran for the car. She was reaching for the door handle when she heard the shouts behind her. The guards had spotted her. Morrison leaned across and threw open the passenger door. Now, Ms. Swift. Tasha dove into the car, and Morrison hit the gas before her door was even closed. The sedan lurched forward, tires squealing on the narrow road. Through the rear window, Tasha could see guards spilling out of the compound's main gate, weapons drawn, but they weren't shooting. They wouldn't risk hitting her. Jin Woo's orders, probably. Always protecting his investment. Are you injured? Morrison asked, her eyes flicking between the road and her rearview mirror. Did he hurt you? I'm pregnant, Tasha said, the words tumbling out. He got me pregnant on purpose. To trap me. I just want to go home. Please, I just want to go home. We'll get you home. But first, we need to talk about why you were really in Seoul. The word sent ice through Tasha's veins. What? Morrison navigated the winding road with practiced precision, putting distance between them and the compound. Your consulting job with Meridian Solutions. Did you really think you were just doing marketing analysis for Korean tech firms? I was doing marketing analysis. That's what I was hired for. You were hired by a CIA front company, Ms. Swift. Meridian Solutions doesn't exist as a legitimate business. It's an intelligence operation. And you were the perfect asset because you had no idea you were gathering intelligence. The car swerved slightly as Tasha grabbed the dashboard. No. No, that's not possible. I interviewed with real people. I had real clients. You had handlers and targets. Every meeting you took, every report you filed, every piece of data you collected on those tech companies was fed directly to US intelligence. Those firms have connections to North Korean weapons development, to Chinese military technology, to operations that threaten American security interests. Morrison glanced at her, and something almost like sympathy crossed her face. I'm sorry. Most effective assets don't know their assets. It's cleaner that way. Less complicated. Tasha felt like she was drowning. Kang Jin-woo. Did he know? We believe so. We think that's why he approached you initially. You were getting too close to information about his organization's connections to those same tech firms. He needed to neutralize you as a threat. Romance was the obvious solution. Every memory of the past 3 months shifted into a new, horrifying context. The gallery where they met, had that been staged? Their first date, their first kiss, the moment she thought she'd fallen in love, had all of it been manipulation? So everyone was using me, Tasha said numbly. My government. The man who claimed to love me. I was just a pawn in everyone's game. You were a civilian caught in a complicated situation. But you're safe now. We have a plane waiting at Jeju International Airport. We'll fly you to a secure location in Japan, then back to the United States. Witness protection if you want it. A new identity. A fresh start. And the baby? That's your choice, Ms. Swift. We can arrange for medical care, whatever you decide. But I strongly advise against maintaining any contact with Kang Jin-woo. He's dangerous. And the longer you're connected to him, the more danger you're in. The sedan merged onto the main highway, heading toward the airport. Freedom was 15 minutes away. A plane. American soil. Her old life waiting on the other side of the ocean. Tasha put a hand on her stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing something was there. A cluster of cells that would become a person. A person who was half her, half Jin-woo. Half victim, half villain. Could she really walk away from that? Could she raise this child alone, always wondering, always looking over her shoulder? Morrison's phone rang, and she answered it in rapid Korean. Her expression darkened. We have a problem. Kang's people have roadblocks on all routes to the airport. He's mobilized his entire organization. Can we get through? Not without a confrontation. And if shooting starts with you in the car, this becomes an international incident. U.S. Embassy official in firefight with Korean organized crime. Morrison pulled the car to a stop, killed the engine. I need you to make a choice, Ms. Swift. We can try to run this blockade, and maybe we make it, maybe we don't. Or we can negotiate. Let Kang come to us. Let him make his case. And then you decide, clearly and on the record, whether you're staying or going. If you say go, we go, and he'll have to back down or risk everything. Tasha looked out at the Jeju landscape, so beautiful it hurt. She'd come to Korea looking for adventure, for a story she could tell herself about being brave and independent. Instead, she'd found violence and betrayal and a love that was really obsession wrapped in expensive suits. But she'd also found something else, hadn't she? In Jin-woo's eyes when he covered her body at the cafe. In his voice when he admitted his wrongs. In the vulnerability he'd shown that night in the fortress bedroom. Maybe it was Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe it was denial. Or maybe it was something more complicated than she wanted to admit. Call him, Tasha said quietly. Let him come. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded and made the call. 20 minutes later, a convoy of black vehicles appeared on the road ahead. They approached slowly, deliberately, parking in a semicircle that boxed in Morrison's sedan. The doors opened, and Jin-woo emerged from the lead vehicle, flanked by Daesung and Hyun-woo. A dozen other guards fanned out behind them, weapons concealed but ready. Jin-woo walked toward the sedan alone, his hands visible, his expression carefully neutral. He stopped 10 feet from Tasha's door, waiting. Morrison looked at Tasha. Do you want me to come with you? No. This conversation needs to be just us. Tasha opened the door and stepped out into the afternoon sun. The wind from the ocean whipped her hair around her face as she faced the man who destroyed and saved her in equal measure. Jin-woo's eyes swept over her, checking for injuries, the gesture so automatic he probably didn't realize he was doing it. You're hurt. Your hands are bleeding. I climbed a wall. Walls have rough edges. Tasha kept her distance, maintaining the space between them like a physical barrier. Appropriate metaphor, don't you think? Everything about us has rough edges. You were running away. I was exercising the freedom you stole from me. Into the arms of the CIA who used you without consent? Who put you in danger? Who made you a target? Jin-woo's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his control. At least with them I'm a person, not a possession. Tasha shouted back. At least they're offering me choices, even if those choices are illusions. You didn't even give me the illusion, Jin-woo. You just took what you wanted and justified it as protection. Because I love you. The words exploded out of him, raw and desperate. Because the thought of you leaving, of never seeing you again, of our child growing up without knowing me, it's worse than any bullet, any blade, any death I've faced. I know that makes me selfish. I know that makes me wrong. But it doesn't make it less true. Tasha felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. Love isn't supposed to hurt like this. Love isn't supposed to feel like drowning. No, Jin-woo agreed, taking a single step closer. Love is supposed to be a choice. And I took that choice from you. So I'm giving it back now. Jin-woo reached into his jacket pocket, and every guard on both sides tensed. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was Tasha's passport and a thick envelope. He held them out to her, his hand steady even though his eyes betrayed something deeper. Your passport. $50,000 in cash. Enough to start over anywhere you want. Director Morrison can put you on a plane tonight, and I'll make sure no one follows you. No tracking. No surveillance. No interference. Tasha stared at the documents in his hand, unable to move. This was what she'd wanted. What she'd been planning since the moment she discovered the pregnancy. Freedom. Escape. Her old life waiting across the ocean. So why couldn't she make her feet move forward to take them? There are conditions, Jin-woo continued, his voice carefully controlled. If you leave, I dismantle the Biko syndicate. I hand over operations to my second-in-command and walk away from the organization. I become Daniel Cho, legitimate businessman, nothing more. I get therapy for the control issues, the possessiveness, all of it. I work on becoming someone worthy of being a father, even if it's from a distance. He took another step closer, and this time Tasha didn't back away. But if you stay on your terms. You decide where we live. You decide the boundaries. You decide if and when we marry. You decide how involved I am in the pregnancy, in the birth, in raising our child. I give you complete autonomy over your own body, your own choices, your own life. I become a partner, not a captor. And if I ever want to leave later? Tasha's voice cracked. After the baby is born? After a year? After 10 years? Then you leave. With my blessing and my support. I'll never trap you again, Tasha. I swear it on my parents' graves. On the life of our child. On whatever honor I have left. He was close enough now that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the fear barely masked beneath the surface. I know I don't deserve your trust. I know I destroyed any foundation we might have built. But I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. Not in who I was, but in who I'm willing to become for you and our baby. Director Morrison's voice cut through the moment. Ms. Swift, I need to remind you that Kang Jin-woo is under investigation by multiple international agencies. Staying with him means accepting a life of scrutiny, danger, and moral compromise. We can protect you from all of that. We can give you a normal life. Normal, Tasha repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. She looked at Morrison, this woman who represented her government, her country, her supposed salvation. Like the normal life I had when you were using me as an unwitting spy. Like the normal life where I was gathering intelligence I didn't know I was gathering? That kind of normal? Morrison's expression didn't change. That operation kept weapons technology out of hostile hands. Your work, whether you knew it or not, served a greater good. I didn't consent to serving a greater good. I consented to a marketing job. You took my choices just as much as he did. The only difference is you wrapped it in patriotism and called it justified. Tasha turned back to Jin Woo, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. You're both manipulators. You both used me. You both made decisions about my life without my permission. But at least you're admitting it. At least you're trying to make it right, even if I don't know if that's possible. She looked down at her stomach, still flat, still hiding the secret growing inside. A baby conceived without her consent but existing nonetheless. A baby who would need a mother strong enough to make impossible choices. A baby who deserved better than to be born from trauma and lies. I'll stay, she said quietly, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff with no certainty of landing safely. But not because I forgive you. Not because I trust you. I'm staying because running away to witness protection with the CIA means spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if they're still using me, still lying to me. At least with you, I know what the monster looks like. Jin Woo's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, there was moisture there. I'll spend every day proving I can be more than a monster. I promise you that. Promises are easy. Actions are what matter. Tasha finally took the passport and envelope from his hand, their fingers brushing for just a moment. I want to leave Korea. Both of us. New country, new identities, completely legitimate life. If you really mean what you say about dismantling the syndicate, then we start over somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere your enemies can't find us. Somewhere our child can grow up without bulletproof windows and armed guards. Done. Where do you want to go? Jin Woo's response was immediate, no hesitation. New Zealand. Queenstown. Mountains and ocean and space to breathe. We become Daniel and Tasha Cho, and you figure out who you are when you're not a crime lord. And you'll go to therapy? Every week. Whatever it takes. And I control my own birth control, my own medical decisions, my own body from this moment forward? Completely. I'll never touch your autonomy again. Tasha turned to Morrison, who watched the exchange with professional detachment. Tell Imani I'm okay. Tell her I'm making my own choice this time, even if it's complicated. And tell your agency that I'm done being an asset. If they ever try to use me again, I'll go public with everything. I'll burn the whole operation down. Morrison's lips pressed into a thin line. You're making a mistake, Ms. Swift. Men like Kong Jin Woo don't change. They just get better at hiding what they are. Maybe. Or maybe people are more complicated than the boxes we put them in. Either way, it's my mistake to make. My choice. My life. Tasha walked back toward Jin Woo's convoy, not looking back to see if he was following. She knew he would be. For better or worse, they were bound together now, not just by the baby growing inside her, but by the wreckage of everything that came before and the slim hope of something better on the other side. The ride back to the compound was silent. Tasha sat in the back seat, Jin Woo beside her but not touching, respecting the invisible boundary between them. When they arrived, she went straight to the bedroom and locked the door, needing space to process what she'd just done. Had she made the right choice? Or had she just chosen a different cage, one decorated with promises instead of locks? She pulled out her phone and finally called Imani back. Her friend answered on the first ring, her voice frantic. Tasha. Oh my God, where have you been? The embassy called and said they found you but then you disappeared again and I've been losing my mind. I'm okay, Imani. I'm safe. It's complicated, but I'm safe. Tasha's voice broke, and suddenly she was crying, all the fear and exhaustion and impossible weight of the past week pouring out. I'm pregnant. The father is a Korean crime lord who got me pregnant on purpose to keep me from leaving. I was working for the CIA without knowing it. Someone tried to kill us. And I just chose to stay with him instead of going into witness protection because somehow that felt like less of a lie. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Imani's voice, steady and sure. Okay. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. But first question, and be honest with me. Are you staying because you want to, or because you're afraid of what happens if you leave? Tasha thought about it, really thought about it. Both. I'm terrified of him, of what he's capable of what loving him might cost me. But I'm also terrified of running for the rest of my life. Of raising this baby alone while looking over my shoulder. Of never knowing if the people claiming to help me are just using me for something else. At least this way, I'm choosing my own poison. That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard you say. I know. But it's also the most honest I've been with myself in months. I ignored every red flag because I wanted the fairy tale. Now I'm living in the consequences. The best I can do is try to build something real from the wreckage. They talked for another hour, Imani making Tasha promise to call every day, to have an exit plan, to never let Jin-woo isolate her from the outside world. When they finally hung up, Tasha felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it. A soft knock on the bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. Tasha? I've made dinner. You need to eat. For the baby. Jin-woo's voice was careful, tentative in a way she'd never heard before. She opened the door to find him standing there with a tray of food, looking almost uncertain. This man who commanded an army of criminals, who survived assassination attempts before breakfast, looked genuinely worried that she might refuse his offering of grilled fish and rice. Thank you, she said, taking the tray. Jin-woo, I need you to understand something. I'm staying, but I don't love you right now. I might never love you again the way I did before I knew the truth. The best I can promise is that I'll try to build something new. Something honest. But it's going to take time. A lot of time. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. Forever if I have to. He turned to leave, then paused. I called my therapist in Seoul. She's setting up video sessions twice a week starting tomorrow. And I've begun the process of transferring the syndicate operations. It'll take a few months to do it properly, but it's happening. Good. That's a start. Tasha closed the door and ate her dinner alone, watching the sun set over the Jeju Ocean. Somewhere out there was the life she'd left behind in Atlanta. The normal, boring, safe life where the most dangerous thing she faced was a difficult client or a late deadline. That life was gone now, as surely as if it had never existed. In its place was this strange new reality where she was pregnant with a crime lord's baby, where she'd been an unwitting spy, where she'd survived an assassination attempt and chosen to stay with her captor because all the other options were somehow worse. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even a particularly good story. But it was hers. Her choice. Her life. And for the first time since she'd seen those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, Tasha felt like she had some control over what happened next. That night, she dreamed of a little girl with her dark skin and Jin-woo's intense eyes, growing up in a house by the mountains, safe from the violence that had brought her into existence. It was a nice dream. Tasha hoped reality would be kind enough to let even a piece of it come true. When she woke the next morning, Jin-woo was already gone, off to Seoul to begin the complicated process of dismantling an empire he'd spent his adult life building. Mrs. Kong brought breakfast and a note written in Jin-woo's precise handwriting. I'm making good on my promises. Starting today. I'll be back by dinner. If you need anything, Daesung has orders to get it for you, no questions asked. You're not a prisoner anymore, Tasha. You're the mother of my child and the woman I'm trying to deserve. I hope someday that will be enough. 6 months passed in a blur of transformation. The Jeju compound became a temporary home while Daniel systematically dismantled his criminal empire. Tasha watched him spend hours on encrypted calls, transferring operations, settling debts, ensuring his exit wouldn't create a power vacuum that would endanger them. True to his word, he attended therapy twice weekly via video conference. Some sessions left him pale and shaken, facing demons he'd buried for years. Tasha started her own therapy, processing the trauma of everything that had happened. Learning to separate fear from genuine feeling. Understanding that her choice to stay didn't make her weak, it made her strategic. In her 4th month of pregnancy, they moved to New Zealand. Queenstown welcomed them as Daniel and Tasha Cho, a wealthy couple seeking a quieter life. No syndicate. No CIA. No bulletproof windows or armed guards. Just a house in the mountains overlooking a pristine lake. Daniel started a legitimate tech consulting business, using skills he'd always had but never properly applied. Tasha launched her own marketing agency, working with real clients on actual projects. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Tasha still woke screaming from nightmares about the cafe shooting. On those nights, Daniel would appear in her doorway, never entering without permission, just standing there until she decided whether she wanted company or solitude. More often than not, she chose company. They'd sit on the back porch wrapped in blankets, drinking tea, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Seoul's orphanages after his parents died. About being recruited into the Biko syndicate at 16 because he was smart and desperate and had nowhere else to go. She told him about the pressure of growing up in Atlanta with parents who expected perfection. About taking the Seoul job partly to prove herself and partly to escape suffocation. About how lonely she'd been before meeting him, how that loneliness had made her vulnerable. "I should have seen the warning signs," she said one evening, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby was active now, kicking like she was training for gymnastics. "All the red flags. But I didn't want to see them because you made me feel special." "You are special." That was never a lie. The circumstances were wrong, my methods unforgivable, but what I felt was always real. Daniel's voice was quiet. "Still is. I know. That's what makes it so complicated." They existed in strange limbo between enemies and lovers, bound by the baby growing between them. Tasha set boundaries, and Daniel respected every single one. Separate bedrooms until she decided otherwise. No physical intimacy unless she initiated. Complete autonomy over her body, her medical decisions, her birth plan. He attended every prenatal appointment but always asked permission first. Bought baby supplies but let her make final decisions. He was learning to be a partner instead of a captor, and the effort showed. Her water broke 3 weeks early at 2 in the morning. "Daniel," Tasha called out, her voice surprisingly calm. "It's time." He appeared within seconds, hospital bag already in hand. No panic. Just steady competence. The drive through empty streets felt surreal. Daniel's hand found hers, squeezing gently through each contraction. Somewhere in the past months, she'd started letting him touch her again. Small things at first. Now this, his fingers laced with hers, anchoring her. Labor was brutal. 18 hours of contractions that felt endless. Daniel stayed through all of it, letting her crush his hand, whispering encouragement in mixed English and Korean. "I can't do this," Tasha gasped during a particularly harsh contraction. "Yes, you can. You survived me at my worst. You can survive anything." It was so absurdly honest that Tasha laughed through the pain. Then she pushed, until suddenly there was a cry, high and indignant, and a nurse placed a tiny perfect human on her chest. "It's a girl," the nurse announced. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Completely healthy. Tasha looked down at her daughter, this tiny creature with dark skin and black hair, and felt everything shift. All the pain and betrayal and complicated choices suddenly made sense. Not justified. Not forgiven. But contextualized. "Naomi," she whispered, touching impossibly small fingers. "Naomi Sun Cho." Daniel leaned over them, tears streaming down his face. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father. And I promise I will spend every day being worthy of that title." Tasha carefully transferred Naomi into his arms, showing him how to support her head. Daniel held their daughter like she was made of starlight, his expression transformed into pure wonder. "She's so small. How is something so small so perfect?" "I don't know. But she is." Tasha leaned back, exhausted but unable to look away. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." He looked up, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need you to know that I'm staying. Not because I'm trapped or afraid. Not just because of the baby. I'm staying because somewhere in these months, you became someone I could choose. Not Jinwoo the crime lord. But Daniel. The man who keeps promises. Who goes to therapy even when it's hard. Who's learning to share power in this relationship." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I don't deserve that choice. Probably not. But I'm making it anyway. Life isn't about deserve. It's about what we do with broken pieces. We've taken something broken and built something real. Something imperfect but honest." She touched his face, wiping tears. "I haven't forgotten what you did. I haven't completely forgiven it. But I see who you're becoming, and I want to be part of that journey. For me. For Naomi. For us. Daniel closed his eyes against her palm. I will spend the rest of my life earning this. I know. That's why I'm staying. As the sun rose over Queenstown's mountains, painting the hospital room gold, they sat together. The three of them. A family built from broken pieces. Outside this room, the world continued with all its complications and dangers. But inside, they had this moment. This beginning. The first weeks with Naomi were chaos and wonder mixed together. Daniel learned to change diapers at 3 a.m., to walk endless circles when she wouldn't sleep, to sing Korean lullabies his mother once sang to him. Tasha watched him transform from a man terrified of his capacity to harm into a father who researched the best formula and read parenting books with the same intensity he'd once used for syndicate operations. One night, she found him in the nursery at 4 a.m, just watching Naomi sleep. Is she okay? She's perfect. I just wanted to make sure she was breathing. He turned to Tasha. I keep thinking about what could have happened. If those men at the cafe had been better shots. If I'd lost you both. But we're here. We're safe. She took his hand. We stay smart and vigilant, but we don't let fear stop us from living. Naomi deserves better than parents constantly looking over their shoulders. He pulled her close, and she let herself fully relax into his embrace. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. They stood holding each other while their daughter slept, and Tasha felt something she hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Not complete or permanent, but real. The months that followed brought growth. Daniel's therapy continued. Tasha started joining him for couple sessions. They talked about trust and trauma, about forgiveness and moving forward. It was hard work. Some sessions ended in tears. But they kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept choosing each other. On Naomi's 6-month birthday, during a walk through Queenstown's botanical gardens, Daniel proposed. Marry me. Not because you have to. Not just because of Naomi. Because I love you, and I want to spend my life proving love is more than the terrible way it started. Tasha looked at him, her captor and savior, her worst mistake and greatest choice. Ask me again in a year. If we're still doing the work, still choosing each other, still building something real, then ask. And my answer will be yes. Will be? Definitely will be. But you have to wait. You have to earn it. Daniel smiled. I can wait. Therapy taught me patience. That evening, as Naomi slept and they sat on the back porch under endless stars, Tasha thought about who she'd been 18 months ago. The naive woman who'd boarded a plane to Seoul looking for adventure. Who'd fallen for a charming businessman without seeing the danger beneath. That woman was gone. Replaced by someone harder and wiser. Someone who'd survived betrayal and violence. Someone who'd chosen to stay with her captor and somehow built something real from the wreckage. Was it the right choice? Maybe she'd never know. But it was her choice, made with open eyes and full awareness of all the complications. Daniel emerged with a fussy Naomi, settling beside Tasha. Their daughter between them, they watched the stars in comfortable silence. Thank you, Daniel said finally. For staying. For giving me a chance to be better. For this life. Thank you for keeping your promises. For doing the work. For becoming someone I could choose. She looked at Naomi. She'll have questions someday. About how we met. About the complicated truth. Then we'll answer honestly. We'll tell her people make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones. But those mistakes don't have to define us if we're willing to change. We'll teach her about accountability and growth and the messy reality of love. And if she judges us? We'll accept that judgment and love her anyway. That's what parents do. Tasha had learned that survival sometimes meant staying instead of running. That courage sometimes looked like forgiveness. That love was rarely simple but could be real even when complicated. She'd been trapped by a pregnancy she never consented to, caught between a crime lord and the CIA, forced to make impossible choices. But somewhere in that darkness, she'd found her own power. The power to choose. To demand change. To build something new from wreckage. Was it a happy ending? Not in the fairy tale sense. There were still scars, still trauma to process, still moments when the past crashed into the present. But it was real. Honest. Theirs. Maybe that was better than any fairy tale. Because fairy tales were pretty lies about perfect love conquering all. This was messy truth about imperfect people doing their best. About a woman who'd been violated finding her voice and power. About a man who'd been a monster learning to be human. About a baby born from darkness who would grow up surrounded by light. As night deepened and stars wheeled overhead, Tasha made peace with her choices. Not because they were right or wrong, but because they were hers. She'd survived. She'd chosen. She'd built a life from ruins. Daniel carried Naomi back to her crib, and Tasha followed, watching him settle their daughter with practiced gentleness. This man who'd once commanded criminals now sang lullabies and changed diapers without complaint. People could change. Not easily. Not without tremendous work. But they could change. And witnessing that change, being part of it, choosing to believe in it, took its own kind of courage. Standing together in their daughter's nursery, hands linked, watching her sleep, Tasha finally let go of who she'd been. She was a mother now. A survivor. A woman who'd stared into darkness and refused to let it consume her. "I love you," she whispered, saying it for the first time since discovering the pregnancy. "Not the way I loved you before. Something deeper. Harder. More real." Daniel's breath caught. "I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of." As Tasha drifted toward sleep in Daniel's arms, their daughter safe in the next room, she felt something she'd thought lost forever. Hope. Not for a perfect future, but for a real one. A complicated, messy, beautiful one they'd build together, day by day, choice by choice, from broken pieces of everything that came before. So what do you think? Was Tasha right to stay or should she have run? Can people really change or was she fooling herself? If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think, smash that like button. Drop a comment sharing your honest thoughts. Do you think this was love or Stockholm Syndrome? Redemption or delusion? Hit that subscribe button because we've got more Afro-Korean Mafia stories coming that will keep you up at night asking these same impossible questions. Stories about love and power, survival and choice, the messy reality of being human in a complicated world. Thanks for staying with Tasha's story to the end. Some stories don't have neat conclusions. Some just have people doing their best with impossible situations. And maybe that's the most honest ending of all. This was her story. Her choice. Her life. And in the end, that's all any of us can control. The choices we make when every option is imperfect. The grace we extend for being beautifully, terribly human. The hope we hold onto when darkness tries to take it away. Tasha held on to hope. And sometimes, that's enough.